to be in the ring with Roddy Piper. I mean, to share a microphone with Roddy Piper. Like, you have no idea how much I idolized Roddy Piper when I was a teenager. Like, I was such a nerd when I was in high school. I had, you know how kids in high school, you'll put like bands' names on the front of it, you know. I cut out a picture of Roddy Piper in his kilt from a wrestling magazine. He was on the cover, and like glued it to my my binder. Now, walking around, you know, the halls of Dundalk High School, that didn't get over with the girl. I mean, like the chicks didn't.
Yeah, it didn't get over with the girl.
That didn't get over with the chicks, you know. But it's like I didn't care. I loved Roddy Piper.
Yeah, you know, Kevin, I didn't care either when they.
That was one of the highlights of my experience here at MCW was that night because I was at ringside as well for that, and I remember I'd grown up watching Roddy Piper, of course, too, and he was such a cool guy that night as well. But I remember at ringside, he leans over to me, he goes, "I'm going to kiss you now," and he just planted a big kiss on my cheek, and I was like, "Oh my God, Roddy Piper just kissed me!" But like that was one of my like most favorite memories here at MCW too. Was that night and hearing you guys talking in the ring to get like it was one of the best segments ever.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but it was so I got to work with Roddy in WWE, right? He came in. It was one of those cyber nights. I don't remember if we called it.
Cyber Tuesday.
Cyber Tuesday. Thank you.
I remember a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now. It's coming back.
So I was the writer assigned to this segment, which was a Piper's Pit, but we didn't know who the guest was going to be. It was fans could vote. It was either going to be Chris Jericho, Dolph Ziggler, or The Miz. And these things were a shoot. Like, it was legit, like, it wasn't worked. So, as the writer on the segment, I was told...
Like, it was really picked by the people.
Those things were really picked by the people. Vince would not work them. 100%. He's like, it's got to be legit. So, I was told at the show, like, I mean, this is not done ahead of time. This is, the day of the show. I have to write 3 separate Piper's Pit segments. One for Jericho, one for Dolph, one for Miz. Now, eventually, all 3 of them were, in every scenario, all 3 of them eventually come out. But how you started it and what, okay, Jericho starts one. Well, he and Piper have to have an interaction. That's one segment, and then who comes out next and how do they get into it? Okay. Then, for the Dolph angle or for the Dolph, what does he do? And so I had to write 3 separate segments because we didn't know which one was going to happen. And I remember a lot of times with talent at that level, this is not handing a promo to a mid-card talent and you say, memorize this, and that's the end of it. There's no back and forth. With these talents, especially Piper and Jericho and Miz, Dolph didn't have as much, but they all had their own opinions, especially Jericho, of how this segment's going to, like I hand them the paper and they're like, okay, all right, so now let's talk about how we're going to do this. And so now, we're debating back and forth, and I was like, oh my, this is going to blow up. And I got to write 3 separate versions. And, the clock's ticking. Like, we're on live at 8 o'clock. And, I don't know, it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. This isn't. And I could tell Roddy was, like, his head was just swimming with all these different scenarios. Of, like, he's trying to get it all in his head. And Roddy's big with ad-libbing anyway.
And old school guys like that, they're not used to that.
Exactly.
Because he spent 30 years
100%
ad-libbing.
Yep.
Right.
So I'm just thinking, my God, it's going to... And a lot of times when these things go bad, the writer is the one who gets yelled at. It's not the talent, right? So I'm like, this could be the night I get fired. So, and then Vince was making changes up until like 5 or 10 minutes before the segment. He's like, tell Piper he's got to say this now. Or oh, God, I gave it to Roddy. And I just saw this look on his face. I'm like, this is just going to be a disaster, right? So they go out and do the segment. Jericho won the vote, so Jericho goes first. So that's the scenario we do. And they're out there, and I'm in Gorilla. Writers have to be in Gorilla with the headsets on, communicating. Vince is to your left. Kevin Dunn's in the truck, and you got to kind of communicate. You have to sort of tell them where we're going. So Kevin knows what shots to get and this and that. That's great when everybody follows the script. Roddy's out there, and he immediately starts going off the script. Jericho's off the script, and, you got to know when to cue somebody. When do you send Dolph, and when do you send Miz, and they're all over the place. And it was just a train wreck. And Vince starts feeding, luckily Vince wasn't angry as much as he got a kick out of it. He started feeding, if you ever go back and watch that clip, he starts feeding Michael Cole lines to say how horrible the segment is. So Cole starts cracking, oh, this is the worst Piper's Pit ever. So that was that segment, right? It was just a disaster. So that's what we based the Piper's Pit in MCW off of, was Roddy and I had this, the setup was, you know, I knew Roddy was going to be at the MCW show for Piper's Pit. I demanded an audience with him because I wanted him, I basically blamed him. This was the downward spiral of my time in WWE. Vince never forgave me for that segment. So when there were budget cuts, oh, sorry about that. When there were budget cuts, I was the first guy to go. And it all goes back to this segment. And I blame you, Roddy Piper. And, you know, I said, I had a line of like, you know, they say never meet your heroes because they'll always disappoint you. You were my hero. You disappointed me. I just want you to say you're sorry.
Right.
That was the setup.
Yeah, and I specifically remember, because this is something I always got a kick out of as a promoter and still do. Like when I say my kids, you know, like people that I've broke in and trained, and when I give them opportunities or would give them opportunities with stars like that, I'd always get a kick out of just kind of watching their body language before and after, like, and usually, and I just remember all of you guys, like you, Eric, Dirty, everybody, even the Hellcats, because they ran out. Everybody, just when they came back, it was like every one of you guys was like 8-year-old kids, just on cloud nine. That like, holy crap, we just did a Piper's Pit, and then ultimately at that point in time, you didn't know. I remember having a conversation with like Eric, Dirty, everybody, like going back and forth afterwards, because ultimately we didn't know that 10 days later.
11
days later, he passed away. Right. So ultimately, you had no idea that was going to be the last Piper's Pit ever, you know, ever done.
And imagine that, you know, again, I'm that 18, 17-year-old kid with Roddy Piper on his notebook. Now I'm the last guest ever in Piper's Pit. I mean, that's still just even saying it.
Yeah.
It just blows me away. And Roddy was so great to work with. It was another one of those things where he was doing meet and greets and signing autographs, right, taking pictures and everything. And it, obviously, not surprisingly, he had a long line, and he was out there longer than I think we thought he was going to be. So, and I'm real nervous with stuff like not just working with Pike, with anybody. I like to prepare. Like, I really want to know what I'm doing before I got there. I'm not that great on the fly. And so here comes, you know, Roddy and I hadn't really talked. All he said to me early in the night was, "Hey, I hear we're doing this thing about, you know, you're a WWE writer and about that segment we did back then, and okay, you know, I'll get with you later." It was like 15 minutes, I think, before we went out there. Right? You were in the back.
I was. We were in the office, weren't we?
Yes.
We were all
in the office.
We were in the office. Yep. Well, and Piper had been at another autograph signing earlier in the day that ran long because he talked to every single fan, and not just, "Hey, how you doing?" Had whole conversations with them. He was up in Hagerstown and came straight to here. So he got here, and like you said, his line was, you know, really long, and he just took so much time with everybody. And then, it was 15 minutes before the segment, and we were all in the office.
It was 15 minutes, and I'm like, oh, like, I like stuff script. Like, I like to write my stuff out, kind of memorize it. You know, Roddy and I were just going back. He's like, "Yeah, well, you know, you say this, and then I'll say that, and, you know, we'll you know, figure it out." And oh my God!
And he's talking about other stuff in between. Like he's going off on tangents.
And I'm like, I'm going out there with Roddy Piper. Oh my God! Like, I was nervous, but it's like, I don't know, you guys might feel the same way, but it's like you're nervous, but man, as soon as you walk out on that stage,
it goes away.
It goes away, and I'm like, man, this is going to be so cool. Like, I'm walking into the ring, and there's Roddy Piper standing there with the microphone. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And like, he immediately kind of took it off in a little bit different direction, but I'm like, and again, I don't think of myself as being able to think great on my feet, but that was like, you had no choice. And I felt, at least, you know, I'm my own worst critic. Like, I'll criticize my performances all the time, but I thought that night I was as good as I could possibly be, and trying to keep up with Roddy. And like, I was so happy. Like, you know, you go back and watch it, like, well, I could have said this or said that, it could have been better. But just for somebody who had to like ad lib with Roddy, like, we knew where we were going, but he took us in a different way to get there. Like, I was just so happy with it.
Yeah, and that was also, that night was like, for me as a promoter, like a really proud moment for me. You know, I have these moments that I remember people saying something to me, and the fans, people watching should know, like, Roddy Piper, then, who was paid, he had done his shtick. He had done his autograph signing. Could have left. 99.9% of your big stars are gone at that point. Some of them do the autograph signing, and if they're doing a promo or whatever, they're like, hey, let me get that out of the way first match and get out of here. He stayed the whole night and watched pretty much everybody's match, guys and girls, pulled them aside and just and literally sat and watched their matches at the curtain. As soon as they walked through the curtain, hey, do you mind if I have a... I just remember people's faces all night. Hey, guys, do you have a minute? Can I give you some advice? And everybody was like, yes. Just like, are you serious? Like Rowdy Roddy Piper.
You want to talk to me?
Yeah, and I said to him, and I thanked him for that.
Mm-hmm.
And he, like, I went to walk away, and he grabbed me by the arm, and I was like, oh, and he, like, pulls me back, and he said, you have such an amazing product and a platform for young people in this business. He's like, and I go over and see all these indies all over the country. He's like, he goes, if I lived here, if I lived close, I'd come to every one of your shows and stand here at the curtain and do this for all your matches. I think it's great what you do, and you have an amazing platform to help people's careers, and I'm just so impressed with what you got. And I was like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
yeah. So,
yeah.
and I was just like blown away, and I was just like, wow.